mascara smudged messily on both cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Lisa. "It's been a really bad day." "I understand completely," Lisa said gently and kindly. "I'm Ashley Collins. I'm flying to Boston for my grandmother's funeral tomorrow morning." Her voice broke with emotion and more tears spilled down her cheeks. "She raised me from the time I was 6 years old after both my parents were killed in a car accident. My grandmother was absolutely everything to me. She was my whole world. And I didn't get to the hospital in time to say goodbye to her before she died. I was stuck in terrible traffic on the highway, and by the time I finally got there, she was already gone. I never got to tell her one last time how much I loved her or thank her for everything she did for me." Lisa felt her own chest tighten painfully with sympathy and sadness. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That must be incredibly painful. Thank you so much for listening and being kind." Ashley wiped at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. "I'm sorry to dump all of this heavy emotional stuff on a complete stranger. Sometimes strangers are actually the easiest people to talk to honestly," Lisa said quietly. "Please don't apologize." 4 rows behind them in seat 18D, Federal Air Marshal James Rivera sat casually pretending to read a sports magazine while his sharp eyes carefully scanned and assessed every passenger boarding the aircraft. At 39 years old, Rivera had been working as a Federal Air Marshal for 7 years now. Before joining the Air Marshal Service, he had spent 12 years in the United States Army as part of the Special Forces, the elite Green Berets. He absolutely knew how to spot potential danger and threats. He knew how to read people's body language and micro-expressions. He knew how to identify problems and threats before they could become truly dangerous situations. Rivera wore plain blue jeans, a simple solid-colored shirt, and ordinary running shoes. His service weapon was perfectly concealed in a specialized holster. Nobody looking at him would ever possibly guess that he was a federal law enforcement officer. As passengers continued boarding and finding their seats, Rivera performed his standard professional threat assessment of everyone. The stressed businessman on his phone was clearly anxious but completely harmless. The exhausted young mother with the twin toddlers was struggling but definitely not a threat. The elderly couple holding hands posed absolutely no danger whatsoever. The loud college students were annoying but entirely normal and harmless. His experienced eyes passed briefly over the unremarkable woman sitting in seat 14C. Dark brown hair pulled back simply, average height and build, quietly reading a paperback book about gardening. She had politely helped Jerry lift his oversized bag into the overhead compartment. She had kindly offered Ashley a clean tissue when she started crying again. She appeared completely, utterly, totally ordinary in every possible way. Rivera's professional attention quickly moved on to assess other passengers. The lead flight attendant made the standard welcome announcement over the intercom system. Jerry Patterson continued talking enthusiastically, now sharing stories about his sister Margaret's job as a nurse at a children's hospital and her hobby of making elaborate handmade quilts. Lisa listened politely with half her attention while carefully watching the required safety demonstration at the front of the cabin. She had memorized these emergency procedures many years ago during her military training, but she still always paid complete attention every single time. Old habits from military service never completely died no matter how hard you tried. The aircraft pushed back smoothly from the gate and began taxiing slowly toward the runway. Lisa looked out through the small window and watched the organized chaos of ground crews working efficiently around other parked aircraft. The coordinated activity always reminded her powerfully of flight deck operations on aircraft carriers, though civilian commercial aviation obviously moved at a much slower and safer pace than military operations ever did. During the takeoff roll and climb, Lisa's trained pilot instincts automatically noticed every detail. The twin engines sounded perfectly healthy and normal. The acceleration down the runway was completely smooth and even. The rotation and liftoff were absolutely textbook perfect. There was nothing wrong or unusual at all. She was finally, slowly learning how to relax during routine commercial flights. That comfortable, relaxed feeling lasted for exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes. At precisely 3:34 p.m. Eastern Time, Lisa felt something that definitely did not belong. It started very small and subtle, just a slight vibration in the airframe that felt slightly off and wrong. A sound from the engines that wasn't quite right. Then suddenly the aircraft dropped maybe 30 feet before recovering. Several passengers gasped loudly in surprise and fear. Jerry grabbed his armrest tightly. Ashley's plastic water bottle fell off her tray table and rolled down the aisle. "Is that just normal turbulence?" Jerry asked nervously, his knuckles turning white. Before Lisa could formulate any answer, the plane lurched violently and sharply to the right, then overcorrected hard back to the left. Drinks and laptops went flying across the cabin. Someone screamed loudly. A flight attendant walking down the aisle fell hard against the seat back. The captain's voice came over the intercom speakers, and Lisa's entire body instantly went rigid and tense. She heard something in his voice that ordinary passengers would never notice or recognize, a distinct edge of barely controlled fear and panic. Folks, this is Captain Henderson up front. We're experiencing some, unexpected technical difficulties up here. Flight attendants, please return to your seats immediately and prepare for possible emergency procedures. The aircraft shuddered and shook even more violently. Suddenly oxygen masks dropped down from the ceiling compartments above every single seat. Passengers started screaming and panicking. Children began crying loudly. Adults shouted prayers desperately. Lisa's extensive military training took over instantly and automatically. She quickly helped Jerry secure his oxygen mask properly while simultaneously putting on her own. She then helped Ashley, who was hyperventilating badly and making her situation much worse. "Ashley, look directly at me right now," Lisa said with absolute calm authority. "You need to breathe much more slowly. Breathe in slowly through your nose, hold it for 3 full seconds, then breathe out slowly through your mouth. You are going to be perfectly fine, but I need you to breathe slowly and calmly right now." Something in Lisa's voice, the complete and total calm, the quiet but unmistakable command authority, made Ashley immediately focus on her instead of panicking. Ashley nodded quickly and started following Lisa's careful breathing instructions. But Lisa's trained military mind was already racing and analyzing at incredible speed. These symptoms definitely did not match any normal mechanical failure she had ever experienced or studied. The plane was descending far too rapidly for any kind of controlled emergency landing, but the descent wasn't nearly steep enough to suggest complete and total loss of control. Something else entirely was happening here. The captain should be making constant regular announcements to keep passengers informed. He should be formally declaring an emergency with air traffic control. He should be requesting immediate vectors and clearance to the nearest suitable airport for emergency landing. Instead, complete radio silence for over 12 full minutes now. That was absolutely wrong. Air Marshal James Rivera had recognized immediately that this was definitely not any normal mechanical problem. Something was seriously, dangerously wrong beyond simple equipment failure. Rivera unbuckled his seatbelt and began carefully moving forward through the unstable cabin toward the front of the aircraft. As he passed row 14, something indefinable made him look much more carefully and closely at the woman sitting quietly in the middle seat. While literally every other passenger around her was panicking, screaming, crying, or praying desperately, she remained perfectly, completely calm. Not the frozen calm of shock or denial. This was the controlled, professional calm of someone who had extensive experience with genuinely dangerous and life-threatening situations. Her posture was subtly wrong for a normal civilian passenger. Her hands remained perfectly steady while everyone else's hands were shaking. Her eyes continuously tracked and assessed the entire cabin with obvious professional awareness and training. Rivera suddenly remembered a highly classified intelligence briefing from several years ago about special operations personnel who were transitioning back to normal civilian life. There had been detailed files and photographs of high-value military assets who might potentially be valuable resources during certain specific emergency situations. One particular file had shown a female Navy fighter pilot with an absolutely extraordinary combat record and multiple decorations for valor. Her military call sign had been Viper. The official photograph had shown a woman in formal Navy uniform, but the eyes, the facial bone structure, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, it all matched perfectly with the seemingly ordinary passenger sitting in seat 14C. Rivera leaned down very close to her ear and whispered just one single word, "Viper." Lisa's entire body froze completely rigid. Only someone from the military or intelligence community would possibly know that highly classified call sign. She turned her head sharply and looked directly at Rivera with suddenly hard, cold eyes. In that single instant, her entire civilian disguise fell away completely. Her eyes went ice-cold and intensely focused. Her jaw set firmly. She transformed instantly into someone entirely different. Someone dangerous and capable. "That was 10 years ago," she whispered back quietly. Rivera discreetly showed her his official federal badge. "James Rivera, Federal Air Marshal Service. I desperately need your help right now." What exactly is happening? Absolutely no communication from the cockpit for 14 minutes now. No radio contact whatsoever with ground control. The captain should be making constant announcements and updates. I strongly believe someone has taken control of the cockpit by force. Lisa processed this critical information in mere seconds. Hijacking. That's my assessment. And I absolutely cannot handle this situation alone. I desperately need someone with serious combat training and extensive aviation knowledge to help me. Lisa looked slowly around the cabin at all the terrified passengers. Jerry was praying quietly with tears streaming down his face. Ashley was crying and thinking she would never see her family again. Across the narrow aisle, the young mother held both her twin toddlers tightly, whispering that everything would somehow be okay. Behind them, the elderly couple clutched each other desperately. In front, a teenage boy was on his phone crying while telling his parents he loved them. Lisa had deliberately left the Navy specifically to avoid situations exactly like this. She had honorably retired after completing her service. She had absolutely earned the right to live a quiet, peaceful, normal civilian life. She had spent 10 full years carefully building a civilian identity where she would never have to use those dangerous skills again. But all these innocent people were going to die if someone didn't act immediately. What exactly do you need from me? Lisa asked quietly. And just like that, in one instant Viper came back. Rivera explained the situation as quickly as possible. Approximately 15 minutes ago, 3 men had somehow forced their way into the locked cockpit. They had weapons, most likely ceramic knives that could bypass metal detectors. They had violently threatened the flight crew. Since that moment, there had been absolutely no radio communication with ground control. The aircraft was following an erratic, unpredictable flight path. They were slowly descending toward the Appalachian mountain range. They're planning to deliberately crash us into the mountains, Lisa stated flatly. That's exactly my assessment too. Then we need to retake control of the cockpit immediately. Right now. Rivera nodded grimly in agreement. Lisa's extensive pilot training included detailed technical knowledge of commercial aircraft layouts and systems. Her Navy combat training and experience included close-quarters fighting techniques and tactical operations. Her years flying extremely dangerous combat missions had taught her to remain completely calm and focused under impossible pressure. Give me exactly 2 minutes to get into position in the service areas, she said. Then you approach directly from the front passenger cabin. When you engage the guard, I'll strike from behind simultaneously. Lisa calmly told Jerry and Ashley that she needed to use the restroom. Both were far too terrified to question her or even really notice. Instead of going to the passenger restroom, Lisa moved quickly and purposefully to the rear galley area. She found a flight attendant named Michelle crouched behind a large drink cart, trembling badly and crying. Michelle, I'm here to help you, Lisa said quietly but firmly. Who are you? Michelle asked fearfully. Lisa pulled out her old military identification card. She had kept it all these years without really knowing why. I'm working directly with the Federal Air Marshal. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Seeing the official military identification, Michelle's frightened expression changed completely. She quickly explained everything. 3 men with ceramic knives forced violent entry into the locked cockpit, serious threats to kill both pilots immediately if anyone interfered. Where are they right now? 2 men are in the cockpit with both pilots. The 3rd man is standing guard right outside the cockpit door. Lisa nodded once and began moving silently through the narrow service corridors that connected the various galley areas. She moved with complete silence using techniques from military survival and evasion training. The passengers in their seats had absolutely no idea she was moving through the aircraft. At the forward galley, Lisa carefully positioned herself where she could clearly observe the cockpit area. Exactly as Michelle had described, one young man stood guard directly outside the door. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, wearing dark clothes, holding a large ceramic knife, constantly scanning the cabin for any threats. Lisa used precise military hand signals to communicate silently with Rivera, who was slowly approaching from the main passenger area. They had known each other for less than 20 minutes total, but both were highly trained professionals who understood tactical coordination perfectly. The plan was simple but extremely dangerous. Rivera would approach the guard directly from the front, immediately drawing his complete attention forward. At that exact same moment, Lisa would strike from behind with total surprise. Rivera made his move first, walking casually toward the front as if simply heading to the restroom. When the guard noticed him approaching and raised his knife threateningly, Lisa struck with devastating speed. Her extensive combat training took over completely and automatically. She moved with incredible speed and precision honed by countless hours of practice. She disabled the guard's weapon arm with one perfectly placed strike. She rendered him completely unconscious with a second precise strike before he could make any sound or alert his companions. The entire violent encounter lasted less than 5 seconds total. Rivera quickly caught the unconscious guard and dragged his limp body into the galley while Lisa immediately positioned herself right at the cockpit door. Through the small reinforced window she could clearly see 2 more hijackers inside with both pilots. Captain Henderson had bright red blood running down his face from a serious head wound. The co-pilot was slumped awkwardly in his seat, possibly unconscious or even worse. The aircraft lurched violently again, even harder than before. They were still descending far too rapidly. Lisa realized with growing alarm that they were quickly approaching dangerous mountainous terrain. They had maybe 5 minutes left before impact. Lisa and Rivera exchanged quick, precise hand signals. They would breach the cockpit simultaneously from 2 directions, Rivera smashing through the main door while Lisa came through the emergency access panel that most passengers didn't even know existed. It was desperate. It was incredibly dangerous. But it was their only possible chance. The breach happened with perfect military precision and timing. Rivera violently smashed through the main reinforced door while Lisa came explosively through the emergency access panel, both attacking from completely different angles. The 2 hijackers inside were caught completely off guard and unprepared. The fight was brutal, violent, but mercifully quick. The extremely confined cockpit space made it fast. Within 45 seconds, both terrorists were unconscious and securely restrained with plastic zip ties. But the immediate crisis was far from over. Captain Henderson was bleeding heavily from a severe head wound and clearly couldn't fly. The co-pilot was completely unconscious and unresponsive. They were still descending rapidly toward mountains that would kill everyone. And someone needed to fly this aircraft right now. Lisa looked at the complex instrument panel of the Boeing 757. She had never flown this exact specific aircraft type before, but she had accumulated thousands of hours of military flight time in many various aircraft. More importantly, she was the only person on this entire plane who was even remotely capable of trying. "I can fly this," she stated with absolute confidence. "Are you absolutely certain?" Rivera asked urgently. Lisa slid quickly into the pilot's seat. Her trained hands moved across the controls with practiced, efficient precision. All those years of intensive training, all those extremely dangerous carrier landings in terrible conditions, all the hard-earned skills that had earned her the legendary call-sign Viper, they all came flooding back instantly as if she had never stopped flying. She immediately began increasing altitude to avoid the approaching mountains ahead. Her fingers quickly found the radio controls and she broadcast on the emergency frequency. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is American Airlines Flight 2156 declaring in-flight emergency. Viper is now flying the aircraft." The response from air traffic control was immediate and shocked. "American 2156, this is Jacksonville Center. Did you just say Viper is flying?" "Confirmed, Jacksonville. Viper has control of the aircraft. Requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport and all emergency equipment standing by." There was a brief stunned pause. Then, "American 2156, we understand Viper now has the aircraft. We are immediately clearing all traffic. Turn left heading 270. Climb and maintain 15,000 feet. Charleston International Airport is 40 miles west. All emergency equipment is being positioned right now. Viper, it is truly an honor." The air traffic controller was clearly former military himself. He had recognized the legendary call sign immediately. Within just minutes, word spread rapidly through the entire air traffic control facility that the famous Viper was flying a hijacked commercial airliner back to safety. Every single controller and supervisor on duty focused entirely on getting Flight 2156 safely on the ground. Lisa flew the Boeing 757 with the same absolute precision and skill that had made her a legend in the Navy years ago. She expertly compensated for the aircraft damage. She flawlessly managed the complex approach to Charleston. She kept all the terrified passengers constantly informed with calm, professional announcements. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot speaking. We have successfully resolved the emergency situation and are now diverting to Charleston for a precautionary landing. Please remain seated with your seat belts securely fastened. We will be safely on the ground in 12 minutes. Her voice was perfectly steady, calm, and professional throughout. In the main cabin, passengers slowly began to realize they might actually survive this nightmare. Some cried with overwhelming relief. Others prayed thankfully. Jerry and Ashley held each other's hands tightly. Lisa lined up perfectly with Charleston's main runway. She expertly compensated for tricky crosswinds. She touched down so incredibly smoothly that passengers barely even felt the landing. She deployed the brakes perfectly and brought the massive aircraft to a complete stop exactly where ground control had specifically requested. Absolutely perfect landing under impossible circumstances. Emergency vehicles immediately surrounded the plane from all directions. Paramedics rushed aboard quickly. FBI agents arrested the 3 hijackers. All passengers were carefully evacuated and taken directly to crisis counseling services. Lisa desperately tried to remain anonymous through everything. She answered all FBI questions thoroughly and provided a complete detailed report, but she firmly avoided all media attention and declined every single interview request. Jerry found her in the crowded terminal waiting area. "Lisa, I honestly don't know what you did up there, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. I truly thought I would never see my sister and her family again." Ashley hugged her tightly with tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life. I get to go to my grandmother's funeral and be with my family because of you. Thank you so much." Lisa smiled sadly and hugged them both warmly. "Please take care of yourselves. Be with the people you love." Then she quietly disappeared into the crowd. By the time FBI agents were ready for extensive follow-up interviews, Lisa Morgan had already caught a bus back home to Charleston. She had given them complete contact information and answered all necessary questions thoroughly. But she absolutely wanted no publicity, no recognition, no attention whatsoever. The media reported that hijackers had attempted to crash American Airlines Flight 2156, but that an off-duty commercial pilot had assisted in landing the aircraft safely. The FBI classified most specific details. Passengers eventually learned some of what happened, but never the complete true story. Air Marshal Rivera wrote in his official report about the absolutely critical assistance he received from a passenger with extensive military aviation and combat experience. He very strongly recommended Lisa for official commendation. She politely declined everything. 4 days later, Lisa Morgan was back at work at the flower shop. She arranged beautiful roses and carnations for a wedding. She helped an elderly man choose perfect plants for his wife's birthday. She watered the delicate orchids and swept the floor. Her coworkers asked casually about her flight to Boston. She told them it had been delayed due to mechanical issues but otherwise completely uneventful. She said the funeral had been sad but beautiful. She returned to her perfectly quiet, perfectly normal civilian routine as if absolutely nothing extraordinary had happened. But something fundamental had changed deep inside her. Lisa had spent 10 full years trying desperately to completely leave her military life behind forever. She had built a civilian identity so thoroughly and carefully that she had almost started to believe it herself. She had convinced herself that Captain Lisa Viper Morgan no longer existed at all. But she had been lying to herself all along. The skills that had made her Viper were still there, sharp, ready, and waiting. The courage, the training, the ability to act decisively and effectively when innocent lives depended on it. These weren't just job skills she could retire from and forget. They were fundamental core parts of who she was as a person. She couldn't escape that truth. She didn't want it anymore. 2 weeks later, Lisa was at Charleston Airport again, catching a flight to Atlanta to visit a friend. This time she deliberately chose seat 8A, a window seat where she could clearly see the runway and watch the aircraft operations she had once been an essential part of. As she settled comfortably in with a new book, a young flight attendant stopped by her row. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Lisa Morgan?" Lisa looked up carefully. "Yes, I am. I'm Michelle. I was working Flight 2156 a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know you saved absolutely all of us that day. I don't know exactly how, but I know you did." Lisa smiled warmly. "I was just doing what needed to be done. You're a true hero." "No," Lisa said quietly but firmly. "I'm just someone who finally remembered who she really was." As the plane pushed back from the gate and began its taxi to the runway, Lisa reflected deeply on everything that had happened. She had saved 189 innocent lives by using skills she had desperately hoped never to need again. She had worked with a federal agent she had never met before to stop terrorists and safely land a severely damaged aircraft under absolutely impossible conditions. Most importantly, she had rediscovered her true self. The quiet passenger in seat 14C had been nothing but a disguise, a comfortable lie she had told herself for 10 long years. She had tried desperately to bury Captain Lisa Viper Morgan under countless layers of normalcy and ordinary civilian life. But Viper had never really gone away at all. She had just been patiently waiting. The call sign represented years of dangerous combat missions in war zones. It represented proven courage under impossible fire. It represented an absolute unwavering commitment to protecting innocent lives at any cost. As Flight 447 climbed smoothly toward cruising altitude, Lisa opened her book and began reading peacefully. Around her, passengers worked quietly on laptops, watched movies on tablets and talked softly. Everything appeared completely normal and routine. But if another emergency happened, if passengers suddenly found themselves in mortal danger with absolutely no way to survive, there was a legendary Navy fighter pilot sitting quietly in seat 8A. She looked like any other ordinary traveler. But she carried with her all the extraordinary skills and absolutely unshakable courage that had once made her one of the most respected and decorated fighter pilots in American military history. Viper was always ready to answer the call. She always would be.